Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. The White House briefed reporters today as the government shutdown inches toward the longest in U.S. history, with tension over SNAP food benefits beginning to boil over. GOP gubernatorial candidate Jack Ciattarelli telling NTD how he feels on election eve, what he promises if he's elected, and what his supporters tell NTD they want from their governor. White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt blasts New York City mayor candidate Mamdani for comments blaming Trump for bomb threats at the polls, saying it's completely irresponsible based on zero evidence. Two Massachusetts men were taken away in handcuffs this morning in connection with an explosion at Harvard University Medical School. How would policing be affected in NYC if Zohran Mamdani wins as mayor? We talked to a former police executive. A new report suggests nearly $2 billion from foreign sources were donated to back left-wing groups and policies in the United States, with at least one foreign organization connected to the Chinese Communist Party. The French Child Protection Association has accused GN of participating in pedocriminality. This comes after the company failed to remove childlike sex dolls from its platform.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Thank you for staying with us. We're now 35 days into the government shutdown. This morning, President Trump sparked some concern and confusion over the status of food assistance program SNAP. Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt explained that the situation and what it is at a White House briefing. Take a listen.
The administration is fully complying with the court order. I just spoke to the president about it. The recipients of these SNAP benefits need to understand it's going to take some time to receive this money because the Democrats have forced the administration into a very untenable position. We are digging into a contingency fund that is supposed to be for emergencies, catastrophes, for war. And the president does not want to have to tap into this fund in the future. And that's what he was referring to in his Truth Social post. So the Department of Agriculture, as for the latest SNAP payment in the judge's order, put out guidance to states today on how to get that money to the recipients of SNAP. But it's going to take some time. The best way to get the full amount of SNAP benefits to those beneficiaries is for Democrats to reopen the government. So
Leavitt was referring to the Trump administration saying yesterday it will pay out partial SNAP benefits for November after rulings from two federal judges. But on Truth Social this morning, the president said SNAP benefits will only be given when Democrats open up the government and not before. For the 14th time, the Senate failed to advance a House-passed continuing resolution to reopen the government. Now at 35 days, this government shutdown is tied for the longest in U.S. history. The briefing comes at the same time millions of voters are heading to the polls in several key elections. New Yorkers are voting for mayor, New Jersey for a governor, and California is voting on Prop 50 to decide whether the state will redraw its congressional maps. As voters head to the polls, Leavitt addressed the importance of election security.
the White House is working on an executive order to strengthen our elections in this country and to ensure that there cannot be blatant fraud, as we've seen in California with their universal mail-in voting system. It's absolutely true that there's fraud in California's elections. It's just a fact. It is just a fact. They have a universal mail-in voting system, which we know is ripe for fraud.
Multiple bomb threats were made today against polling sites across New Jersey, forcing some polling areas to stop temporarily. New Jersey Attorney General Matthew Platkin said that bomb threats were emailed to polling areas in Bergen, Essex, Mercer, Middlesex, Monmouth, Ocean, and Passaic counties. Platkin urged residents to call 911 if they see any suspicious activity. New Jersey's Lieutenant Governor said there were no more credible threats at this time. Attorney General Mamdani said the Justice Department was investigating. Both of New Jersey's gubernatorial candidates condemned the bomb threats. Democrat candidate Mikey Sherrill described the threats as, quote, a clear attempt to undermine our democratic system and intimidate New Jerseyans from going to the polls to exercise their voting rights. A spokesperson for Republican candidate Jack Ciattarelli said in a statement, quote, "There's no place in politics for nonsense like this." Candidate Zohran Mamdani is now responding to yesterday's message by President Trump suggesting he plans to stand up to the president. And Andrew Cuomo, meanwhile, is criticizing his opponent, saying the self-described Democrat socialist is too extreme.
Well, I think what you're seeing is a civil war in the Democratic Party that has been brewing for a while. You have an extreme radical left that is run by the socialists that is challenging what they would call moderate Democrats. I'm a moderate Democrat. Democrats are not extreme socialists. We're not against the police.
I look forward to representing those New Yorkers and look forward to fighting for every single dollar this city is owed. What we see in the language of Donald Trump is a premise as if it is his decision on whether or not to fund a city the very money that this city is owed. And I look forward to utilizing every single tool at my disposal as the next mayor of this city to fight for the people.
Last night, Trump said it is highly unlikely that he'll be contributing federal funds, other than the very minimum as required if Mamdani wins the election. In response, Mamdani says that he'll, quote, "not be intimidated by the president." The Democratic candidate also describes Trump's statements as threats to the city. Mamdani says he'll defend New Yorkers against those alleged threats by the president. Republican candidate Jack Ciattarelli tells NTD how he feels about the tight New Jersey governor's race at his rally before Election Day. And New Jersey locals at his rally share what they want from their governor. NTD's Mariotsu brings us more from Bridgewater, New Jersey, where she's standing by for Ciattarelli's watch party tonight.
All eyes are on the outcome of what is now a very tight New Jersey governor's race as a key indicator of whether President Trump's rise will carry in what's traditionally been a blue state.
Feeling really good. It's my old hometown. The energy's been great. We're going to win tomorrow.
Republican gubernatorial candidate Jack Ciattarelli held his last rally before Election Day in Raritan, New Jersey, Monday night.
We need a Jersey guy. My opponent's not even from New Jersey. We've had enough of that. Let's elect somebody who's from New Jersey, someone who knows what's going on, and somebody who knows how to fix it.
Joined by his family on stage in Raritan, Ciattarelli touts his deep roots in the state of New Jersey and promises affordability if he's elected governor.
Governor Murphy said that he wanted to make New Jersey California of the East. Mikey Sherrill will continue that. It's those policies that have made New Jersey unaffordable, where we have the highest taxes in the entire country. There will be no middle class because middle class won't be able to afford to live here. If you love New Jersey like I love New Jersey, vote Jack Ciattarelli.
I'm a retired high school principal. Jack used to come to our school and speak to the students, give speeches. He was very energetic. He was open to the kids' questions. And we hit it off. There was a lot of simpatico there. Our taxes are too high, and I know New Jerseyans feel that way, and they've felt that way for years. I truly believe he's going to make a difference there.
Well, I used to be a registered Democrat for 20-something years, or maybe even longer. And the reason why I crossed over was because the Democrats weren't doing nothing here in New Jersey that people look like us. So that's why I crossed over to support Jack.
Yeah, we're both sophomores in high school, yeah. And we're big fans of Jack, obviously. If we could vote, we would vote for him. I saw firsthand, I've met him a couple of times, and he's just a genuine guy. I mean, you could say I'm biased, but I feel that Jack is the more genuine politician, and he actually listens to people, not just people in general, but people like us, people who can't vote.
I feel like Ciattarelli is a good choice for the students because he actually listens. Every time I've spoken to him, he's always been a very open and honest and kind man.
Ciattarelli's son Jake, an Army captain deployed to Kuwait, surprised his father with a visit at his first campaign event of the day.
It feels great. My father's my role model. He's my rock. He's my best friend. It's been tough being away from him for 8 months. But seeing everything that he's doing from that far away and being able to be here for the finish line, it's a great feeling. He's an incredibly genuine man. He's patient, and he listens. I think that's one of the most important things that draws people to him. When you listen to people and understand what their problems are, people trust you.
Reporting from Bridgewater, New Jersey, Mariotsu, NTD News.
Voting is underway for races in New York, New Jersey, and Virginia as the government shutdown enters day 35, matching the record for the longest shutdown in U.S. history. Joining us to discuss is Mike Leon, host of Can We Please Talk podcast and director of strategy at the Free and Equal Elections Foundation. And we have Tony Kinnett, national correspondent for the Daily Signal and host of the Tony Kinnett Cast radio show and podcast. So good to see you guys as always. Mike, I'll start with you this week. What are your expectations as to how much longer the shutdown will continue? Because Senate Majority Leader John Thune said he's optimistic that the government shutdown could actually come to an end this week.
Well, first off, good to see you guys on this Tuesday. Everyone go exercise your civic duty if you live in those states, especially in California, too, with the Prop 50 on the ballot. In terms of the government shutdown, we talked about this last week. I'm 2 days away now from flying. I've seen all the different delays at the airports with the air traffic controllers. I've seen different reports from airline correspondents across networks talking about how this government shutdown is having a real impact with respect to not only travel delays, but obviously people not getting paid while working. And we've talked about this a bunch here. I don't know anybody that wants to work for free for 35 days, as you just mentioned, Don, right? Which ties the longest in our history. So do I see anything coming to fruition here over these next few days? As I mentioned last time, I don't see any incentive for either side right now to come to this table. I do see incentives for them to keep running the cameras and keep going on every show possible and talking about what the other side needs to do, but they're not talking to each other. Marjorie Taylor Greene went on The View today. John Fetterman was on Sean Hannity's show last night. They definitely know where the studios are for some of these places. I wish they knew where the Capitol building was so they can actually get together and work on this and get a resolution so we can start paying employees and start getting things back into motion. Because remember, once the government shutdown is over, Don and Tony, things don't just go right back and snap back into place. Now we have to undo the last 35 plus days of the damage that has been caused by all of this, and the people that have been furloughed from all of this have to come return back to work. So there's a lot that needs to uncoil from all of this. So I would like for them to stop running to every camera available and actually start talking to each other.
So Tony, maybe you're a bit more optimistic about how long this shutdown will continue?
I think that for sure, and of course, good afternoon to you both as usual. I think that there actually is going to be a lot that hinges on this particular election as to whether or not one side caves and caves soon. And by the way, some of my estimates for that come in things that I've made as kind of predictions over the last couple of weeks, that you're going to see some of the more moderate, some of the more purple state Democrat senators eventually flake away. Originally, the Hill speculated this includes John Ossoff of Georgia, Gary Peters of Michigan, Elisa Slotkin of Michigan. I don't know if I agree with that one. Maggie Hassan, New Hampshire, Peter Welch of Vermont, Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin, which I think was a very good prediction. Well, last night, according to Politico's reporter Jordan Carney from their congressional reporting team, said that they saw a lot of those individuals in the Capitol Hill basement. So, maybe to your wish, Mike, I'd say that we actually are seeing some individuals meet together and say, hey, look, this looks really bad for Michigan Democrats. This looks really bad for Georgia Democrats. John Ossoff, the poor man, is sweating more every time I see him on camera. That's not a joke. That's not me teasing. I mean, there's a lot of nerve that goes behind this. I think Lisa Murkowski has reached out to moderates as well. But it's whether or not the elections, I think, maybe in New Jersey, go to Republican or Democrat, whether it goes to Jack or Mickey, that we'll see one side start to make either caving motions or, God forbid, Trump gets his wish on the filibuster.
So, Mike, as you know, Vice President J.D. Vance has said that Democrats are holding the government hostage, right? You've heard that. And you can't reward that behavior. Those are his comments. And as you know, millions of people are being impacted due to this shutdown. Why should this be used as leverage for political negotiations?
Well, why? I mean, they use it. You just said what he said, and that's exactly what they're doing. Everyone does it to a certain extent. And the analogy I like to use is the seesaw analogy, right? Like one side's up, one side's down. Or a better analogy, right? You hurt your knee or you break your entire leg and it shatters in half. Like both are bad, right? You scratched your knee up pretty good, but the other one, the knee is gone completely. And that's what we have right here, unfortunately, with these two parties right now going back and forth. Republicans, and Tony and I have debated this a bunch, Republicans control the government. They control all three levers of the government right now. It is true what Tony's going to say about the continuing resolutions, and there's been clean CRs that have not been passed. Unfortunately, though, that only punts the football to January, no pun intended, where we'd have NFL playoffs, and then we'd have me and Tony on Tuesday talking about when is the government going to actually work on this, funding the government through the entirety of 26 fiscal budget and beyond. And then we're going to have more of the politics being played, Don, to Tony's point, because the midterm elections are in 26. So there is a wide range of things that are happening here. Both parties, Democrats control a minority vote that is essential to get to 60. But Republicans can circumvent all of that by doing the nuclear option, to what Tony said, and actually reopening the government. Neither wants to do neither, because it does help them gain, like you said, political movement with their voters. Democratic voters know, hey, we don't control any of the numbers. Republicans control everything. Remember the mandate? They kept telling us a mandate, a mandate. Republicans can do the exact same thing. Hey, 53 plus 7 is 60. We're missing 7. They are the 7. So they keep doing it. Why do they keep doing it? Well, that's why we all have jobs, because we get to talk about this and we get to talk about the political football that goes back and forth.
Okay, so Tony, your comments, and then I want to move the conversation on to the elections in New York City.
So, I mean, Mike, I think this is one of the ways that we also agree on this particular economics of politics conversation here. The Trump administration economically is simply Bill Clinton, but more socially conservative and protectionist. Both parties right now are essentially on the line of Republicans want to spend a ton of money on defense. They want to spend a ton of money on particular subsidization programs. And then the Democrats want to spend a ton of money on completely different programs. And that's not long-term feasible. Of course, we're reaching, again, looking at the SNAP benefit change and who's been eligible and on SNAP benefits since the Obama administration. I mean, going from, 7.5 million before his first term to now through the last couple of administrations, Trump and Biden included, 42 million. That is a lot of Americans that are on yet another government entitlement program, some who absolutely need it, some who absolutely don't, as we've seen from some of the cases of fraud. And again, that's not a blanket sweep statement. That's just saying the amount of money we're spending on these programs is increasing. And when you look at the kicking the eternal football, just further down the field, say, well, we'll see if we ever get to an end zone. Yeah, the end zone is coming. And I think that while I'm not a fan of the nuclear option, because then you want to see political theater and just one side gets all, then yeah, the nuclear option becoming reigning supreme will essentially just makes the Senate another House of Representatives. It already is that way after the failure of the amendment that removes the state election of senators through the legislature. So again, yeah, I think a lot of this is political theater, but I'm a little more optimistic that both sides are actually losing favor over this. This is I talked to Ken Cuccinelli, former Attorney General of Virginia, about that this morning, that both sides are going down in approval rating over this shutdown. Everyone's just tired of Congress.
Okay, so Mike, I want to talk about the election in New York City for mayor. As you know, Zohran Mamdani is ahead in most polls, likely to get more votes than anyone else. But the interesting part is that he won't, at least very likely, not more than half of all votes, right? And this hasn't happened since 1969. How are you looking at that, Mike?
Yeah, well, I'm looking at the mayor's race a couple of different ways. I love the package that you guys played before we came on, especially in New York and New Jersey, 2 states that I lived in and went to college in New Jersey, because those packages convinced me that we need not only civics education in this country, but we need people to get a little bit more informed about the issues, especially when it comes to the buzzwords of socialism and communism, as the son of a kid who left a communist country that is now an authoritarian regime. So I'm going to leave that right there, because there's a lot of terms and people love to throw the buzzwords out there. But in terms of Zohran winning this election, RCP, my friends over at Real Clear Politics, Tom and Andrew and them, they do a great job with the polling. It shows he's around 46%. He's probably going to win this by a good wide margin. And then I think from there, what we're going to see over the next couple months of Zohran Mamdani being the mayor will be over scrutinized. You want to talk about political theater. Every single decision or any type of granular decision that's made, especially when it comes to New York City, arguably one of the biggest cities in the world, is going to get over magnified, especially if, to Tony's point, tonight goes the way of all of the Democrats, meaning they win the Virginia governor's race, meaning they win the New Jersey governor's race with Mikey Sherrill, and they win the New York City mayor's race with Zohran Mamdani. Everything now is going to be, is Zohran the future of the party? We saw conversations like this when Eric Adams was winning in the primary against Andrew Yang, and then all of a sudden now you can't find Eric Adams on a Democrat milk carton. He wouldn't be on one. He's missing. So, and I think that's the problem now with Zohran. When it comes to this election, what I want people to understand out there, first off, nobody's fleeing New York City. And if you do flee New York City like I did, it's because you can't afford to live in New York City. It's because the apartment I lived in that was $3,300 a month is now $5,700 a month. And my salary has not gone up, Don. If anything, it's stayed flat. That's the reason why people are leaving New York City. It's not because he wants to defund the police. No, he wants to keep them at the $33,750 that they have allocated. He just wants to add more community enforcement and mental health service providers. So that way, like we have recently with the NFL running back Doug Martin, that had a mental health breakdown. Police were called to the situation. There was no mental health officers that were called, and he lost his life after dealing with police in that encounter. That happened in California. In New York City, we need to have more mental health professionals that are available on resource to be able to deal with these issues so they can help police. It's not about getting rid of police. So my message to all New Yorkers out there, calm down for a second. You're not going anywhere, Meghan McCain. You're not leaving that apartment. I know where you guys live. Like, everybody calm down. You're going to stay in New York City. You're going to be fine. They did this with Dinkins. They did this with de Blasio. You're going to be fine.
Okay, so Tony, maybe you can now speak to Mamdani's policies. How popular or unpopular do you think it is with the electorate?
So I'm hearing a little bit of have your cake and eat it tooism, and I've seen this from a lot of the Democrat strategists who are nowhere as deep thinking about issues or as honest about issues as Mike is. And Mike is the cream of the crop when it comes to actually thinking through things to the other side. And he has said a lot of those things before, and I'm not just trying to fluff him up here. There are a lot of strategists over the last couple of months who have essentially taken when Zohran has said defund the police, and an earlier moment said, I want fewer police officers, his words. And then after he was pushed and shoved and prodded by, PR agencies and CARE, which funded a large portion of his campaign, we're now finding out due to comments by Linda Sarsour. And then, of course, through some current officials, now he's been forced to kind of walk those things back. You can't really have both ways here in his particular campaign, where he's run a very aggressively progressive campaign that has been radical in a lot of its racialism, that has been radical in his proposals to allot funding by racial measures, to allot services by racial measures. And then he hasn't really gone back on a lot of those things. There is some damage that he can do as the mayor of New York City. And to the no one's fleeing New York, there are a lot of businesses that have begun sealing up deals and closing things early. I would suggest that Cuomo here, as much as I don't like him, missed a huge opportunity. Let us say that in a particular instance that there is a Don Mamdani that's running for mayor somewhere, and he's really, really radical. Then I, as the Republican candidate in this instance, and Mike, as the Democrat candidate, a coalition ticket of moderates who wants to see things paused while we get some of the craziness of the temperature turned down, is an effective ticket that I think a lot of New Yorkers wanted. And unfortunately, Curtis Sliwa and Andrew Cuomo's egos were far too big, and it's likely to divide the ticket and cost a lot of New Yorkers an election result that they didn't want, like you said, Don, since back in '69.
Okay, Mike, you probably have a response, right? Can we hear it?
No, Tony's the best. He's really good at saying a lot of these things. And not only that, the only thing I will take umbrage with is the connotation around radical. He is right about some of the things that Zohran Mamdani has said that he's had to walk back, right? There are certain things, and especially the campaign donations. His campaign has returned back some foreign donations that they got recently, and they were getting killed by that, by the campaign finance board saying, hey, these are donations that they should have returned months ago. So there's always some truth in all of that. And I do agree about the coalition building. Here's the problem that I have, right? Republicans have never run a serious candidate outside of Giuliani years ago. And Siwa was able to get up that Republican ticket when you had an opportunity, to Tony's point, given off of what happened in 24, 25 running against an inexperienced democratic socialist. You can still use the buzzwords when you're talking about the socialism, but you can harp on the inexperienced part of this and what Republicans can do to change that, versus Andrew Cuomo was a fixture in New York politics and has drawn the ire of the president in 2020. He left with 2 scandals, not only in terms of his decision-making on policies with COVID, but also scandals in terms of sexual harassment. You had a clear opportunity there to actually give a serious third candidate. And look, Curtis Siwa has been in my life since like 1981, Don. I was born in Long Island Jewish Hospital. I've known about Kurt Sewell for forever. I've known about that stupid beret for forever. And that's the problem. Anybody would tell you, and Donald Trump alluded to this in the Oval Office, that beret gives off a connotation that you are not serious. The guardian angels are not a serious thing. You have never worked in any type of public office. You never even tried to gain some type of office like an assemblyman, like what Zohran did. So when you don't put a serious candidate out there like that, unfortunately, this is what you get. And I think Republicans had that chance, to Tony's point, because of Cuomo, the scandals, inexperienced Democratic socialists. Hey, by the way, I'm a Republican. I believe in capitalism, law and order. Boom, give me somebody serious. And maybe New Yorkers would have had a little bit more of an actual
Jack Ciattarelli,
option
for
here.
instance.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, Tony. I want to get your opinion on Mamdani's policies, specifically, for example, freeze on rent increases or free childcare and no bus fares. What do you think about those policies?
So, well, there's the pragmatic and the real, and then there's in theory. So in theory, those policies, when they're tried, they don't work. They don't. They burnt fun little flats of New York City down in the 70s over insurance issues. You have situations where the free bus fare was tried in places like St. Louis. It failed. It's been tried in other cities in the United States and around the world, and it doesn't do very well at all. There's just a lack of respect when things are just given kind of free off the walk. They don't actually provide the counter incentive that is supposedly given. They've talked about that here in Indianapolis. It really isn't going anywhere. As to the free childcare and the rent freezing, he doesn't have the ability to do that kind of rote in fiat as mayor. And even in the case where he did have such authority on freezing the rent for housing, he doesn't even have the functional ability over 100% of that kind of housing, only 25%. And it would be a board independent of his control that would have to approve the various means and measures to freeze rents in certain cases. And he was also forced on the grocery store, the state-run, city-run grocery store measure, to walk that back today on CNN because he just doesn't have any kind of a meaningful pathway forward. So what does he have left to really anchor support for his base? He has law enforcement in New York City. And that's where my concerns really come through. When you push the guy who has all of these goals to accomplish, we saw this with Trump in the first term, right? He had certain things he wanted to do and he couldn't do. So then he ended up overcorrecting into the few areas he did have control over. And they got way more exacerbated than perhaps if he had actually accomplished all of those things in a measured way. The spending of political momentum, if you catch what I'm trying to get at there.
Okay, Mike, we have to wrap up. If you have any real quick comments, maybe 30 seconds that you'd like to share.
Well, I think for tonight, I'll be watching the way all these races play out, because to Tony's point, I hadn't even thought about it with the government shutdown. Maybe it does have a needle mover if we see Spanberger win by, plus 8, 9, 10 percentage points. Mamdani clearly wins by the 15 percentage points right now. And if Mikey Sherrill, I actually think Jack is going to win tonight, but if Mikey Sherrill were to win by such a margin in New Jersey, mainly because of Phil Murphy and his approval rating being so low that he's a Democratic incumbent, I would think that Jack would win. But if all three go to Democrats in such wide margins, I do think that it sends a message, to Tony's point, to voters out there that they're maybe not happy with the way the Trump administration is doing things. And it could lend those moderate Democratic senators, maybe even some moderate Republicans like Lisa Murkowski and them, to say, hey, how do we talk to each other now? Because we lost in a big way come election night.
All right, Mike, Tony, always great to speak with you guys. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Today, millions of voters across California will cast their ballots to weigh a plan known as Proposition 50. If successful, it will likely allow Democrats to gain 5 more seats in the U.S. House of Representatives. California Governor Gavin Newsom and state Democrats pushed through the redistricting plan over the summer in response to Texas's move to redraw its maps. Missouri, North Carolina, and Ohio also recently redrew their congressional maps. More states, including Florida, Illinois, Louisiana, and Maryland, among others, are considering similar options. Around 60% of likely voters planned to support the proposition, according to a recent Berkeley poll. Former California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger criticized the measure, saying they're trying to fight for democracy by getting rid of the democratic principles of California. President Donald Trump weighed in on Truth Social. The president posted, quote, "The unconstitutional redistricting vote in California is a giant scam in that the entire process, in particular the voting itself, is rigged." And Maryland has become the latest state to enter the tit-for-tat between Republican and Democrat-led states over control of the House. Maryland's Democratic Governor Wes Moore announcing today that he's forming an advisory commission to consider redrawing state congressional maps. It comes on the same day that California residents will vote on a ballot initiative to redraw congressional districts in a way that would be more favorable for Democrats. Texas Republicans were successful in their recent effort to redraw maps to benefit the GOP. Nearly $2 billion from foreign sources donated to back left-wing groups and policies in the United States. At least one of the foreign organizations is connected to the Chinese Communist Party. That's according to a new report. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has more.
Protests for green energy, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, and other social justice policies like anti-immigration enforcement, bankrolled by foreign money. A nonpartisan report uncovered 5 foreign charities funneling money to left-wing groups. One called the Children's Investment Fund Foundation has ties to the Chinese Communist Party.
We were able to trace that over $550 million in foreign money has come from his UK-based charity into US-based organizations.
$550. That is a third of the entirety of Kamala Harris's presidential campaign.
Right.
Another group called the Oak Foundation has contributed at least $8.2 million to a center that funds protests to abolish ICE, the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. While the United States technically has laws preventing foreign nationals and governments from giving money directly to campaign PACs and candidates, grassroots advocacy on big policy disputes flies under the radar.
You cannot win without all these outside groups that are the 501c3s and the 501c4s. You cannot tell me you can win today without C3s and C4s on the outside. Guess what's not regulated by the FEC?
Yeah.
Issue advocacy campaigns, voter education, protests. So there's these huge loopholes on the state and federal level.
Her group, Americans for Public Trust, is working to get the loopholes closed. Today in Michigan, Sutherland will testify to support a bill to do so. Some states are already working to stop foreign adversaries from purchasing land or contributing to state ballot issue campaigns. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Virginia voters are heading to the polls to elect a new governor. The Republican candidate is facing an uphill battle, but a race down the battle looks neck and neck. There's a chance the state could elect its first mixed executive branch in 2 decades. NTD's Melina Weisskopf is on the ground in Arlington, Virginia.
At the top of the ticket, Virginia voters will elect a new governor to replace Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin, who's now done with his first and final term according to Virginia law. On the Democrat side, you have Abigail Spanberger, who's a former 3-term congresswoman who retired just this year to make this very run for governor. On the Republican side, you have the current lieutenant governor, the Republican Winsome Earl Sears, who's running on keeping a good thing going, though it looks like Virginians are looking for a change of course. That's according to polling that shows the Democrat candidate has led with a wide margin throughout most of the campaign season. It's generally expected that the Democrat will come out on top here, but that's not a surprise considering the fact that Virginia has a history of electing a governor to the opposite of the party of the sitting president.
I generally believe that there's federal overreach that is happening, and I see that state elections are one way to kind of balance that out.
I'd like to do away with guns. You know, there was a bad shooting in Scotland some time back, so they ban all guns.
Oh, I think it's going to hurt probably the Republicans because there's a lot of feds sitting at home feeling the pressure of having to pay bills and not having the money in the bank to pay for them. So for those people who don't have a big savings account, they're really hurting.
Speaking on the way our country's going, the crime rate, the political violence, that's definitely a negative. But also I want to see us continue in Virginia with an administration as a governor that has actually benefited Virginians, all Virginians, and that's Governor Youngkin, and I want to see the next governor be Winsome Sears.
Either way it goes, Virginia is certain to have its first female governor. Down the ballot, the race gets tighter when you look at the race for Attorney General. Democrat Jay Jones is neck and neck with the current Republican Attorney General James Miyares. We could see a situation where the governor's office is not the same political party as the attorney general's office. One voter telling me this could have nationwide implications.
If Virginia has a Democrat as a governor and a Republican as an attorney general, that's going to be part of the tension. Because what happens when Democratic attorneys general decide to sue the administration again together? And he won't. He said, no, I'm not going to do that. Then what power does she have to force him to join that litigation? I don't know.
Next, we're discussing democratic socialism and NYC mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani's policy ideas. Joining us is Jeffrey Tucker, founder and president of the Brownstone Institute and senior economics columnist for the Epoch Times. Jeffrey, always great to have you here. First off, can you talk to us about the defining features of democratic socialism that Mamdani is bringing to the table?
Well, I wish I could answer your question clearly, because as far as I can tell, he's just a flat-out communist. And I don't mean that as an insult. I mean that as an actual description of his understanding of the way the world works. He thinks that all profits are taken from labor, that that's an unjust extraction of value. If anybody makes a profit, that view is a threat not just to the billionaires and the big businesses in New York, but just the taco stands and every single business. I mean, he quite frankly does not understand anything about basic economics. He doesn't believe in supply and demand. He thinks you can just give everything away for free. It's a cartoonish version of reality that it comes out of high-level academia that has nothing to do with economic reality on the ground. His economic vision is completely Marxian, as far as I can tell. This is not a normal Fabian, sort of democratic socialist that you might find in Britain in 1920. This is just straight up communist ideology that you would find in the 1870s and 1880s in radical circles in Europe, and that was rallied around by the likes of Vladimir Lenin at the outset of the Bolshevik Revolution. So this is not has nothing to do with Western normalcy or bourgeois values or anything else. It's a fundamental attack on property rights. And if he gets his way, and I suppose he'll be elected mayor in New York City, mostly thanks to the absence of voter ID laws. But if he gets his way and makes dramatic changes, you're going to take what's already a post-apocalyptic environment in New York City and many places and make it actually worse, possibly discrediting his ideology for another century, in which case that would be a good thing. But I feel extremely bad for all residents of New York City if he actually has a hand in readjusting policies in the city towards his liking, because he was going to take a bad thing and make it much, much, much worse. And I'm sorry for being so blatant about this, but a person with views like this has not run a big city in the United States essentially ever. And New York was once the greatest city on the planet Earth, and it's just truly heartbreaking to see the city go this direction.
Yeah, I mean, you can be blatant, nothing wrong about that. But I want to talk about specifics here. For example, his government subsidized grocery store idea. What's going to happen if he implements that policy?
Empty shelves. Those things will not last, and he'll be upset because he'll be upset that the private stores are competing with his beloved grocery stores, and then he'll try to shut them down or nationalize them. These things go in cycles like this. Communism doesn't work. His state grocery stores will not work, and he'll try to scapegoat the private producers, just like Lenin tried to scapegoat the landowners in Russia. It's always or Mao did the same thing in China. This stuff just repeats itself over and over. And I suppose that people start developing these positions and opinions based on a complete inability to read anything on the history of communism. Because if he took 10 minutes and read about it, he would know that communism is not an economic system. It's the opposite of an economic system. It takes economics and throws it in the trash and tries to substitute the will of a dictator, which is what he's going to be if he gets his way. Now, it's possible he won't be able to get anything done. That's the best possible outcome for poor New York City. But already, I guess he's favored to win the election. I promise you, this very day, you have people preparing to sell their businesses and take their capital out. I mean, New York right now is on a precipice. Capital has been fleeing that city now for 5 years. You've got a new version of Wall Street opening up in Texas called Y'all Street. We've got the decentralization of capital. It can go anywhere these days. It's not stuck to one town. Already, New York City has lost so many residents, and there's huge swaths of it that used to be lovely and safe that you can't even move. There are parts of the city that you can't even hardly breathe for the smell of trash and urine and weed. It's not a safe place. People stop taking the subway. So, you need a different kind of mayor there. It's a genuine tragedy for the city that this is what it's come down to. Again, to go back to a previous theme, so I promise you this Mamdani guy is, at least from his stated views, will be a calamity for the city. But I'm not even sure he would have gotten as far as he had if the city had, or the state, or for that matter, New Jersey also, had voter ID laws. You cannot have fair elections in absence of voter ID laws. The minute you get rid of voter ID laws, you're getting rid of genuine, authentic, valid elections. So that's what this really comes down to. As far as we can tell from the polling, native-born citizens would have rejected this guy straight out. But and that's not really a good standard to use. Voter ID means clean voter rolls and an ID that matches somebody who's already on the rolls, and they show up by a verified person who does a verification of who they are, and then they vote. And if that happened, I promise you there's zero chance that Mamdani would get anywhere near being mayor. So this is what troubles me so much, that we're going to get a communist running what was once the greatest city in the world and in the United States through elections that are not even verifying the voters. This is a genuine tragedy, and it's being watched all over the world and all over this country. And I promise you that any state or any city that's actually a functioning city is going to look at this and say, uh-oh, we better not go the way of New York. Now, can New York recover from this? Well, they're probably, maybe, but they're going to have to turn the corner on voter ID and start electing rational, educated, normal human beings to public office in the future.
So, Jeffrey, I'll just ask you one more thing here. And if we look into history, we learn that attempts in socialism or when communism takes hold, it usually ends up being sort of an authoritarian environment, authoritarian control. Mm-hmm. Could that take place in New York City?
Well, if he wants to, the reason this always happens is that socialism doesn't work. It doesn't function because it's a fundamental attack on property rights and the price system and market forces like supply and demand. I mean, just basic economics or the ability of anybody to run their business. This is why socialism just doesn't attack the big business and nationalize big industry and redistribute the profits. In the end, it goes after the small landowners, the small businessmen, and anybody who's any kind of success at all. Well, New York City relies above all else on people succeeding in the marketplace. That's all that they have. That's what built the city. I mean, so it doesn't work, and when it doesn't work, then you've got a problem. You've got a person in charge who claims to be smart and elite and has all the resources and the power, and then they end up using just straight out force, compulsion, coercion to take property away from their political enemies. They become paranoid, and then they create a kind of dictatorship. And I'm not just, again, if this were 150 years ago, I could see why people might be confused about this, but we have 150 years experience now with exactly this kind of vision, putting it in place in many different countries in the world, and the exact same result has happened every single time. And it's just absolutely foolish for anybody to think this isn't going to happen to New York City. Again, maybe the bureaucracy is too thick and he'll be stopped, and that would be a genuine blessing. But let's not be fooled by the claims that he's a democratic socialist, therefore different from Mao Zedong or something like that. I have listened to the guy very carefully. His economic vision is identical to something like a vision of Marx in the 1870s. No different. Understands absolutely nothing about the market process, about what profits are, about what prices are, or anything else about how New York City became New York City. If a guy like this had been in charge, there would be no Empire State Building. There would be nothing remotely like what is there today. So it makes sense that a guy like this is going to end up presiding over the dismantlement of what was once one of the world's great cities. And it's genuinely heartbreaking. It should be sad for every single American to watch this. We all have a stake in the future of New York City, even if you don't live there. The reputation of the United States has been historically bound up with the greatness of the city. So it's a very bad sign for America. And to go back to my previous theme, we could probably have prevented this with some better voter ID laws. I don't think we'd even be looking at a possibility of a Mamdani victory at this point.
My only explanation for why people keep trying this, despite, if we look into history repeatedly, it's shown that socialism and communism just doesn't work. It fails every time. The only explanation I have is perhaps maybe people just have a memory of a couple decades. I mean, I don't know. But anyways, that's a conversation maybe for another time. Jeffrey, thank you very much for talking to us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay, let's take a look at the lineup tonight. Polls are closing in Virginia at 7 p.m. We're watching 3 races in that state, governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general. In New Jersey, polls are closing at 8 p.m. Voters there are also choosing a new governor. In New York City, polls are closing at 9 p.m. And in California, polls close at 11 p.m. Eastern Time on Prop 50, a pro-Democrat redistricting plan. Make sure you tune in tonight at 7 p.m. to get the latest election results with live analysis from reporters and on-the-ground teams. NTD's Steve Lance and Tiffany Mayoral bring you more on the special live coverage for the biggest races tonight. So tune in to NTD, and that's at 7 p.m. Eastern only right here. Don't miss it. Democrat redistricting is on the ballot today. Millions of voters across California will cast their ballots to weigh a plan known as Proposition 50. If successful, it will likely allow Democrats to gain 5 more seats in the U.S. House of Representatives. California Governor Gavin Newsom and state Democrats pushed through the redistricting plan over the summer in response to Texas's move to redraw its maps. Missouri, North Carolina, and Ohio also recently redrew their congressional maps. More states, including Florida, Illinois, Louisiana, and Maryland, among others, are considering similar options. Around 60% of likely voters planned to support the proposition, according to a recent Berkeley poll. Former California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger criticized the measure, saying they're trying to fight for democracy by getting rid of the democratic principles of California. President Donald Trump weighed in on Truth Social. The president posted, quote, "The unconstitutional redistricting vote in California is a giant scam in that the entire process, in particular the voting itself, is rigged." And Maryland has become the latest state to enter the tit-for-tat between Republican and Democrat-led states over control of the House. Maryland's Democratic Governor Wes Moore announcing today that he's forming an advisory commission to consider redrawing state congressional maps. It comes on the same day that California residents will vote on a ballot initiative to redraw congressional districts in a way that would be more favorable for Democrats. Texas Republicans were successful in their recent effort to redraw maps to benefit the GOP. How would policing be affected in NYC if Zohran Mamdani wins as mayor? Joining us to discuss is Jason Johnson, president of the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund and former police executive. So Jason, good afternoon to you. Thank you very much for joining us today. So first off, I would like to ask you, what does Mamdani intend to do, in your view, in regards to policing if he is elected?
Well, Zohran Mamdani is on the record as a defund the police advocate. He's, in the past, starting in 2020, was a harsh critic of the NYPD, called for defunding of the NYPD, called them racist and many other derogatory terms. So I think he's sort of set the stage for a showdown between himself and the NYPD, the leadership of the NYPD, perhaps slashing their budget or trying to replace the NYPD in many of their duties with non-sworn, unproven social workers or others that might try to fill the gap. That is where he's coming from. So I think there's a real concern about public safety if he is elected as expected.
So there's a couple points there, and I'll follow up on one. I'll follow up on them one at a time. So in terms of reducing the size of the NYPD, is there a correlation between the size of the police force and crime rate?
Well, of course, policing isn't the only means that a municipal government can use to reduce crime, but it has been shown to be one of the more effective means, at least in the short term. So the visibility and the presence of uniformed police officers on the streets of any city, including New York, our largest city, has been shown to have a dramatic impact on crime. In addition to its actual impact on crime, it has a huge impact on the perception of crime and the perception of safety. So which is really important in a city like New York that relies on tourism. People, in addition to everything else going on in the city, there's lots going on that would bring tourists in. If tourists don't feel safe, they're not going to show up. And if they don't show up, then it takes a huge hit to the economy of the city. And so, yeah, absolutely, it's critical that the police department be adequately staffed, not only to, again, address actual crime, but also to address the perception of safety.
So on his violence or crime interruption programs, whatever the official term is, what is your guess on the effectiveness of that is, like his proposed Department of Community Safety?
Yeah, these are ideas that progressive mayors and some progressive governors and other politicians have floated and tried. Many cities across America have violence interrupter programs, and none of them have been proven to be effective. City I'm very familiar with, city of Baltimore, the mayor would have you believe that the institution of his program is what has resulted in the reduction of crime in Baltimore. But he fails to mention that at the very same time he started that program, there was a brand new prosecutor that actually is going after criminals. And that really is where the reduction has come from. So at the end of the day, it's a great talking point for progressive politicians who want to pivot from traditional law enforcement. But the fact is, he himself has really softened his rhetoric. And I think that's a prelude that he has some concerns about his own plan, or at least his electability under his plan. He's way ahead in the polls, but nevertheless, he's really sort of taken a U-turn on the idea that he would rely on these types of programs to reduce crime instead of the police.
Can I ask you, does a sitting police commissioner have any leverage or say over an incoming mayor?
No, police commissioner is a sitting duck, more or less. They really don't have any input into who the next mayor is going to be. The voters will decide that. Now, some voters might be concerned that the current police commissioner may not be willing to serve, who's been very effective, by the way, may not be willing to serve under a Mayor Mamdani. And, if that's the case, who knows who you're going to get as police commissioner? I think it'd be really difficult to recruit somebody, given the rhetoric that he's had as a candidate and even before his candidacy about the NYPD and the direction he wants to take it, that very few policing professionals, I think, would be interested in serving in his administration. And the current police commissioner, I think every citizen of the city should be concerned about whether the current police commissioner is going to be willing to serve. She's been very effective at her job and reducing crime and in other aspects of it. And it would be great to keep her. I think he'd want to keep her. Whether she'd be willing to stay or not is only she can answer that.
So if the mayor says he wants to implement certain policies, does the police commissioner have any cards to negotiate with the mayor?
You know, I mean, they can point out to the mayor whether it's going to the problems that it might cause if the policy were implemented. But at the end of the day, many of these things are the mayor's call, and the mayor has the right to fire the police commissioner. And if the police commissioner doesn't want to go along with their program, that's exactly what they'll do. Now, I'll say there's one policy that as a candidate, Mr. Mamdani has advocated that I think could be particularly problematic, and that is by taking away the commissioner's right to administer discipline in the department and turning that over to some group of citizens who may or may not be acquainted with law enforcement and how it works. That could really have a majorly devastating effect on morale, on staffing, on recruiting. And these are all the things that the city really needs to be worried about right now. And so any potential future, either the current police commissioner or any potential future police commissioner, would be very interested in finding out what role they're going to play in administering discipline in the future. It's a critical role that really only the police commissioner should have.
Okay, so in light of that, on that note, do you have any guesses as to what the culture might look like specifically in the NYPD if Zohran Mamdani becomes the mayor?
Well, you can't imagine it going in a positive direction. I think he's just made it very, very clear that his whole approach is very antithetical to traditional policing. He wants to minimize policing, and he wants to experiment with other ideas of civilian public safety roles of people more or less as security guards, unarmed, unempowered, to actually enforce the law. This is an idea that's been floated in other jurisdictions. Minneapolis floated it. The voters shot it down. The Minneapolis City Council came up with it in the wake of the death of George Floyd. The voters, when they had an opportunity, shot it down because people recognize, even people who aren't affiliated with law enforcement recognize, you need to have actual police officers on the street in any urban environment. The visibility of actual police officers that are empowered with the authority of a police officer, ability to make arrests and enforce the law, is critical. And if you don't have that, you're really just kind of opening up the city to whatever might happen with really no ability to contain or control crime, and certainly not projecting an environment that makes outside people, tourists mostly, feel safe.
Okay, Jason, just one last thing real quick. He's floated the idea of reducing NYPD overtime spending. What do you think about that?
Yeah, again, it's nice to say. I mean, everybody wants to hear that the mayor wants to contain spending and costs, but what happens is because of the staffing issues in law enforcement right now, they have to put police officers out there. There have to be police officers on the street to respond to calls for service, investigate crimes, et cetera. And when staffing goes down, overtime goes up to make up for that staffing. So, you can say that you want to eliminate overtime, but you're giving something up. That means you're going to give up the police presence on the street. Are you going to cut overtime in the homicide, investigating open homicides or other crimes? Are you going to cut it in actual uniformed police officers? I mean, where are you going to cut it without jeopardizing public safety? And so it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to do it.
Okay, terrific insight today, Jason. Thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you.
The state of New York is going after sports and political event trading platform Kaoshi. Kaoshi is getting more attention since putting up advertisements around Manhattan that allow people to profit from political events predictions. The New York Gaming Commission is accusing Kaoshi of running an illegal gambling operation. NTD Sean Marshall has more information.
The New York Gaming Commission says trading on sports and political events like commodities on platforms like Kalshi is essentially illegal gambling. But New York isn't the only state finding issue with how Kalshi has found a loophole to legalize political and sports predictions. And some people believe these prediction numbers can be used to dishearten voters and manipulate polls.
Betting in casinos is fine. because it's a controlled environment. But I've always kind of had a problem with betting creeping into the mainstream, especially with sports. I feel like, I mean, you see the case come down now, which the FBI has been doing, which is a larger mob case. But even with all these regulated sports books, somebody's going to find their way in. A bad actor is going to find their way in. Ultimately, if there's that much money involved, that's just the way the world goes.
There's so many loopholes. It does seem like a little shady, a little sketchy. Like, why do they have to go through so much just to bet on politics? Like, what is this benefiting, really? Like, who is this benefiting other than the major corporations that I guess are getting a cut of everyone's money?
Aside from the many advertisements around New York City, Kalshi has been getting a lot of attention due to their having recently teamed up with the NHL to become the first prediction market to partner with a major sports league. The way Kalshi works around gambling laws can be a little confusing. They're a peer-to-peer exchange that charges a flat transaction fee on every trade. Kalshi does not collect a percentage fee like traditional gambling. The Commodity Futures Trading Commission regulates them as an event contract that can hedge against risk and public interest.
I think it confuses, it's confusing in general. Like, I think if you were to throw that at my grandparents, they wouldn't know what's going on. They're like, what do these numbers mean? I mean, I think it throws people off in the sense that, like, obviously the polling numbers weren't great for Sliwa, but you look at Sliwa's odds on Kalshi, and he's got not even a 1% chance.
Senator Catherine Cortez Masto, Democrat of Nevada, said what they're doing is essentially calling sports betting by another name, and that's just wrong. But Tarek Mansour, Kalshi's chief executive, said in an email, Kalshi doesn't win when our customers lose, which creates a fair, transparent environment for people to trade.
I don't know. Perception is reality. So if you're looking at a billboard and it says Mamdani's got it locked up, then that's what most people are going to go off. And that could influence voter turnout, could influence anything, you know.
So actually, we both used to work at the Mayor's Institute of Public Opinion in college. So we know a lot about polling. Yeah, we know a lot about polling. And like you get the best results that you can, but each poll does say different things. And if you're looking at different publications, like I saw one today where it's like Cuomo's gaining on Mamdani, his lead is losing a little bit, and then you see another poll where it's like, oh no, he's clearly the forefront runner, like he's gonna win. And it's like, you gotta put your trust into, like a poll, and I don't know if you should really bet on that.
I'm a little worried because I think if people look at the polls and see that Mamdani is just so far away ahead that they're not even going to bother to show up. It's a nice night. They might just want to stay home with their families.
Sports books like FanDuel and DraftKings are banned in 20 states. And where these online betting sites are legal, they have to pay taxes, sometimes up to $1 million a year for a single state license. Kalshi does not need to pay the same taxes or follow the same regulations as online gambling companies. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
To discuss is Joshua Phillips, senior investigative reporter for the Epoch Times and host of Crossroads on Epoch TV. So Josh, thank you for joining us today. Always great to see you.
Pleasure. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk about socialism, democratic socialism specifically. In your view, how do you feel about whether this has become more popular, more mainstream, or more widely accepted?
Well, the Democrats right now are kind of in a difficult position. The Democratic Socialists of America is technically a third party, but they really tried to integrate themselves into the main line of the Democratic Party because they can't win elections. So what they've done over the years, they've infiltrated the Democratic Party, they run under the Democrat ticket, they put their candidates as Democrats, and the Democrats, they haven't really wanted to split their party on behalf of them. The DSA, Democratic Socialist of America elements, though, they represent the more extreme kind of progressive, some might call it, parts of the party. The things representing more outright socialism, the things representing, gender politics, race politics, these are DSA issues. Whereas the old school Democrats used to be more like the big tent. If you go back to, 90s, 2000s, look where the Democrats were, like Trump used to be a Democrat. RFK Jr., maybe he's still a Democrat. Guys like Joe Rogan used to be Democrats. And so you do have kind of this big tent, 80% in the middle, that represents what the Democratic Party used to be. And some argue that the extreme positions of the DSA, They might work in local elections, but it might be a real gamble for Democrats to run with.
Okay, so how would you classify Zohran Mamdani's policies?
Zohran Mamdani is going for more, I think, legit socialism. But the reality is he can only do it so much under the existing system. If you want to have real socialism, like pure socialism, you need to dominate everything. Which is one of the reasons why socialists often say, well, it wasn't real socialism or it wasn't real communism. Just doing it in New York City, he won't have the ability to fully implement pure socialism. And he's walked back a lot of his statements. He's said, for example, that he's not for like defunding the police. People pull up old posts from him. He very often talked about defunding the police. There are some mixed reports over his, government-run, again, I want to call them food halls or grocery stores. A lot of media have actually falsely quoted him saying he wants to give free food. Maybe that's part of it because, you could say food stamps are part of that. But what he's talking about are government-run grocery stores that would offer lower prices. The reality is when you do this, it's never sustainable because it messes up the entire free market. What you're likely to have is the lack of the insight into the free market from supply and demand. And you run into the same problems you have in every socialist country, which is the things in demand fly off the shelves, people buy it, people resell it. If he makes it too low of a cost, what's going to happen? You're going to have people, if, for example, it's more expensive in New Jersey, driving into New York, buying it in New York, and reselling it in New Jersey. It's going to upset the entire free market, and you're going to end up with shortages.
So can you give us some examples, real-world examples, where his policies are similar to his policies that have been implemented elsewhere, and what has happened?
Yeah. So in the United States, there actually have been experiments with, you call them like government-run grocery stores, or sometimes usually they're run by like nonprofits. And what results in it is basically poorly run places. They close down very quickly, typically. You end up with large amounts of theft, especially if they say they're not going to prosecute or go after crime. People just steal it because why not? You can look at California, where they're experimenting with light on crime policies as it related to like storefronts. And what happened? Right? Anything under like $900 is a misdemeanor. What happens? People go in and they steal everything they want because there's no punishment for it. You end up with resellers. This is one of the issues, for example, that New York has dealt with like cigarette taxes. It creates a massive black market where people just buy it in one place and sell it in another because you have the free market functioning outside the system. The other thing you have, of course, is just badly run systems where, the issue you have with government-run systems as opposed to privately run, if you want to have something work in the private market, you have to have a few things. You have to have it so that it's sustainable, people want to buy from it. You need to have good service so people want to go there and don't go to your competitors. When you make it government-run, you remove all of the information that educates what is demanded by the free market, quality of service and price.
I mean, what are the core fundamental principles of socialism? Is it just free stuff for those of us that is not so well-versed in the subject?
There are different degrees of socialism. So, on the lighter end of it, there's like state capitalism. Technically, the Nazis, the National Socialist Party, the Nazis in Germany, they were technically like lighter socialism, which was a mixed model economy. They still had some free market principles, but a lot of socialist policies. And the way the Nazis worked is actually closer to the type of socialism light you see a lot of people trying to put in place in the United States. And what was it? Under the Nazis, of course, you had the mixed model economies, what they call state interventionism. And so you'd have, for example, businesses where the government would assign people to run the businesses, and you'd have a partially private, partially public system. That is light socialism. And so actually, again, I'm not talking about the race policies of the Nazis, but the economic policies. A lot of these socialists in America, in terms of economic policy, are closer to the Nazi party. But if you go to like real heavy socialism, that's when you get closer to actual communism. And so heavier socialism is when you get to like Stalinist type policies, breadline type policies. And if you get to that end of it, what is really socialism? Socialism is when you put communism into government. Communism is technically the negation of systems. It is not technically a government program, but you can implement communist policies within it. There are different extents of it. More extreme policies will have things like for like social divisions. More extreme policies will have things on, again, gender policies. agitation policies where you try to view one person as your enemy, one person as your ally. We have seen this in the United States with gender policies and race policies. Every communist country has some kind of narrative with that, whether it's the evil billionaires or the evil kulaks, like they had, of course, of the wealthy peasants in Soviet Russia, whether it's the Jews like the Nazis had who are deemed the enemies, whether it's the educated class, for example, in Cambodia, whether it's even in the United States where they called, the cis white male the enemy of the people, or whether now they talk about the evil billionaires as being the enemies of, the markets.
So how do you know when socialism has changed into communism? How do you know when communism is here?
Well, so this is where a lot of people get confused between socialism and communism. Socialism is the form communism takes when implemented into government. But true communism is only achieved with the negation of systems. So in order to achieve quote-unquote real communism, the socialist state would need to basically implode. You would need to basically destroy all the existing institutions to quote-unquote achieve communism. And so communism is not designed to work. It's designed to destroy. When a government becomes communist, they become a socialist government. You could say they're educated or inspired by a communist type, ideology or principle, but it will always be socialism when put into practice. So, and again, there are different degrees of it. I'm not saying Mamdani is going to make New York City full-on communist. He's only going to be able to do it to a certain extent.
So you gave examples earlier of how socialism leads to problems, right? And history has shown that over and over. So why do we keep trying it?
Well, you'd think people would learn by now.
That's my question.
I would say the reason is because socialism claims to offer the solution to human suffering. And when you're told that, hey, people are starving, the solution is to give them free food. People are suffering, the solution is to kill or eliminate the people causing the suffering. There are people who view this as being like the compassionate thing to do. But what they don't really understand is that it does not work. You don't create wealth by targeting the wealthy. You create wealth by creating incentives or helping the poor build themselves up. You don't create wealth by tearing things down. You create wealth by building things. And so socialism is just based on redistribution of what is already there. Socialism really can't create wealth unless it feeds on the wealthy. But as soon as you feed on the wealthy, you remove the incentive, people stop bothering to do it, and it flattens society. Socialism is for the downward trend. And so, you could argue that there are problems within capitalism. A lot of people, including myself, would argue the problems that people point to in capitalism are usually from state interventionist policies. The reason, for example, why housing costs are so high, mostly because of red tape on new construction. If you want to fix the housing problem where people can't afford rent, remove these state interventionist policies which stem from socialism that prevent us from building new homes or allow monopolies to form. If you let the free market function, it means that when there's demand, you create supply, not that you restrict supply, increase demand, and then strangle society through it. So socialism always does not work because it can only work as long as you can feed on the capitalist.
Okay, just one last question, Josh. Do you think there will be a big impact, or maybe you don't think there will be a big impact if Mamdani, in fact, wins this race and becomes the next mayor for New York City?
There will be a big impact if Mamdani wins. I don't think the impact will be that heavy in New York. And it will be. It will be to an extent. It's not going to be a whole lot worse than New York was, I think, under COVID, to be honest. Because he's going to be stopped from doing a lot of things because of the risk of losing government funding from the federal level. Trump is probably going to put his foot on the brakes and say, hey, you can't do that. It's probably not going to be a whole lot worse than California, to be honest, where they have a lot of these policies he's talking about already in place. And the other reality, too, is the city council in New York is already very far left. They already practice a lot of these policies. But the bigger impact is actually going to be more for what it means on the midterms and the future of the Democratic Party. Because right now, what do you have? You have really the Democratic Party looking for its new leadership, and you have them looking at AOC and Bernie Sanders, both of whom have been more on the Democratic Socialists of America side. This is really a battle, I think, for the future of the Democratic Party and the types of candidates who they choose as their front runners, which is why Cuomo is pushing back against Mamdani, which is why Nancy Pelosi is pushing back against Mamdani. The Democrats, I think, understand that yeah, you might have a socialist win in a local election, but it's not going to work for the big ones. And the Democrats, if they go too far to the extreme, which is what the risk is here, they're going to lose the middle.
Okay, well, Josh, always well said. Thank you so much for talking to us today.
Real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's take a look at the lineup tonight. Polls are closing in Virginia at 7 p.m. We're watching 3 races in that state, governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general. In New Jersey, polls are closing at 8 p.m. Voters there are also choosing a new governor. In New York City, polls are closing at 9 p.m. And in California, polls close at 11 p.m. Eastern Time on Prop 50, a pro-Democrat redistricting plan. Make sure you tune in tonight at 7 p.m. to get the latest election results with live analysis from reporters and on-the-ground teams. NTD's Steve Lance and Tiffany Mayoral bring you more on the special live coverage for the biggest races tonight. So tune in to NTD, and that's at 7 p.m. Eastern only right here. Don't miss it.